started. So thank you everyone who have come on board for this month's VIA webinar. As I've said in some of the previous webinars, what we're trying to do with the VIA webinar is talk about the issues that are impacting on the automotive sector, either issues that are front and center for us and impacting the way the industry is operating, or I'm always looking for experts who can come and help us think about how we run our businesses better and how the industry could operate better. Today, we have Phil Urlich from MITO. MITO, do we say MITO Te Pukenga or
just MITO?
MITO, that's how I've always known you. I've known Phil for about 10 years now. Talking to him about training over those years, it's been a rocky road. It's been a real ride. MITO, as most people know, an absolute champion of the automotive industry and of training. Really important to the industry that we have well-trained, skilled people involved. The issue that is facing the industry is that education in general and vocational education has been the subject of analysis and tinkering and change, and not just tinkering, but fundamental change and shoving around. And it is an area that is constantly being bombarded with governance changes. And the concern for the industry has to be, at what point can we actually settle down and allow the trainers to do the training? This is a distraction that's not necessary. We need to make sure that we just return to what we need, which is training to support the industry, to support career progression, to support the safe repair and inspection of vehicles on the road. It does not help that we have, constantly changing governments trying to muck around with it. We just need something simple. So that's my rant about it. Nothing I say is endorsed or supported by Phil, unless he says so. Phil is here to give us the background on training in New Zealand and where things are at for MITO now and where we hope things might head in the future, and just some of the challenges that we're facing. So I'll pass it over to you, Phil, to get on with it and teach us a thing or two.
Okay, look, thanks for those kind words, Greg. Yeah, look, hopefully I'm just going to spend about 15 minutes talking to you about industry training, where it's come from, where it is now, where it's potentially going to, and then open it up if you've got some questions at the end. So hopefully I'm going to share my desktop with you now, and can you see my
Yep, that's it. Got that.
Awesome. Thank you. Look, great. Look, thanks everyone for coming along today. My name's Phil Urlich. I'm MITO's manager corporate at MITO, and my role includes working with our large corporates to support them with their workforce development strategies, maintaining regular contact with all of our industry associations, including VIA, so that MITO is aware of industry needs. And look, I focus on business development initiatives and work on strategy development and implementation. So look, Greg's asked me here today to talk about industry training, the past, the present, and the future. And look, the views I'm going to express today are mine and not those of MITO. Look, I've worked for MITO for over 10 years now, and before that I worked for the TEC, which is the Tertiary Education Commission. I worked for them as an investment manager, and look, preceding that, I spent the balance of my long working life in the dairy, horticulture, and manufacturing industries, where I employed apprentices and trainees. So I've got a pretty good all-round view of government, industry, and industry training. So look, first of all, I thought I'd just share a little bit about MITO. Now, let me just see why that's not working. Although we'll go here. That's better. So just who is MITO? Look, we cover 9 industries. We were an industry-owned training organisation, and currently we operate as a business unit of Te Pukenga, but I'll talk more about Te Pukenga a little bit later. We focus on supporting our industries with their current and future workforce development needs. We have just over 100 staff. Half of them are based in Wellington and the balance are regionally based. We cover 9 industries, as you can see, with automotive and collision repair being our 2 largest industries. MITO programs are approved by the New Zealand Qualifications Authority, that's NZQA, and our programs have been designed for and by industry to raise the skill levels of workforce and enhance workplace productivity. Currently, we receive just over 70% of our funding comes from co-funding from the government via the Tertiary Education Commission, with the balance of our funding coming from the fees that employers pay. So just a little bit about MITO's performance. We've got around about just under 7,500 learners employed by over 3,400 employers, and they're all enrolled in formal qualifications. So of that total number, about 6,000 are automotive learners, and of that, about 5,000 or just over 5,000 are automotive apprentices. So, over 90% of New Zealand's automotive apprentices are enrolled with MITO. And training occurs mainly on the job with learners trained by skilled technicians in the commercial workplaces using the latest technologies. Training is completed with some off-job training as required. Look, we're unashamedly a high-performing organisation. In 2023, we achieved a credit achievement rate of over 100%. Returning more than $1 worth of training for each dollar the government invested in us. We have consistently been achieving parity for our Maori and Pacific and disabled learners. As far as I know, the only training organisation operating at that level of performance. And we've got extremely high both employer and learner satisfaction for the programs that we offer. Look, I tell companies, MITO doesn't do training, we do workforce development. And there's a difference. Training is about meeting an immediate need. Workforce development has a multi-year commitment horizon. Our role is to help your workforce meet its current and future needs. So, a famous quote, Winston Churchill said, the further back you can look, the further forward you are likely to see. So let's take a brief look at back at the history of industry training in New Zealand, where we are today, and what could the future hold for industry training. So Malcolm, you were talking earlier about the Motor Trade Certification Board. So up until the late 70s, the Motor Trade Certification Board covered the automotive industry. And this government entity was responsible for overseeing the training and certification of workers in the automotive sector. Government-controlled training boards were disestablished in the late 70s due to a combination of factors relating to changing economic conditions, shifts in government policy, and evolving needs in the education and training sector. The training boards were often seen as slow to adapt to these changes. Now, during the 80s, we had industry training underwent significant changes as part of broader economic and policy shifts, which included economic reforms, so deregulation, privatisation, and a shift towards a more market-driven economy. A decline in apprenticeships. Traditional apprenticeship programs saw a decline during this period. We saw policy shifts where there was a move to be more flexible competency-based training models rather than away from the time-served models. And we saw the introduction of a New Zealand qualifications framework in the late 1980s, which was administered by NZQA, the New Zealand Qualifications Authority. And this framework was aimed to standardise qualifications across different industries and education providers to make it easier for learners to gain recognised and transferable skills. Now, some industries began to take a more active role in the particularly in the late 80s, around their own training programs and standards, recognising that existing systems were not adequately meeting their needs. This training laid the groundwork for the creation of industry training organisations, or ITOs, in the early 1990s. So in the 1990s, ITOs were created in 1992 by the then national government as part of a major reform of vocational training. Now, several key reasons drove their establishment. There was a strong desire to shift control of vocational training closer to industry themselves. This was based on the belief that industries are best placed to understand their own training needs and could design and manage their training programs more effectively. And there were skill shortages back in the 90s, and ITOs were seen as a way of ensuring that training was closely aligned to the actual needs of employers to address these skill shortages. And prior systems were often criticised as being out of touch with industry requirements. So ITOs aim to improve the quality and relevance of training to ensure that it was directly informed by and responsive to industry needs. And ITOs were responsible for developing national qualifications based on the competencies developed. So the establishment of ITOs was part of a wider public reforms aimed at increasing efficiency, accountability, and effectiveness by having industry-led organisations responsible for their training. The government sought to create a more efficient and responsive VET system. Overall, ITOs were created to modernise New Zealand's vocational system and to make it more industry-focused, responsive, and effective to meeting the needs of industry. In the 2000s, we saw a focus from the government from the early to mid-2000s, just before the GFC, focusing on participation in industry training. So we saw an increase in both participation in training and an increase in industry training organisation numbers. Initially, the plan was to have about 15 industry training organisations when it was launched in 1992. And at one point, there was 54 industry training organisations as industries thought that they were all unique and different. From the GFC, so the late 2000s through to 2013, when I worked at TC as an investment manager, the focus shifted on to ITO performance. During this time, industry training organisations decreased from 35 to 11 high-performing organisations. And it was during this time that the commercial road transport, passenger service, ports, resource recovery, mining and quarrying industries merged with the high-performing motor industry training organisation, which is now called MITO. Most polytechs, or ITPs, Institutes of Technology and Polytechnics, were running annual deficits right through the 2010s. At the same time, ITOs were generating surpluses and delivering high educational achievement during this period. Then in the late 2019, the Labor government initiated a significant reform of the vocational sector. So to resolve the problem of the failing ITP sector, who were generating these ongoing deficits, the government chose to establish the New Zealand Institute of Skills and Technology, commonly known as Te Pukenga, by merging all of these loss-making ITPs and the disestablishment of the well-performing, surplus-generating, industry-owned ITOs. The standard-setting function, so it's the development of the qualifications and skill standards, was shifted from ITOs to the government-owned and funded workforce development councils. MITO was given no choice but to merge into Te Pukenga. Fortunately, though, those leading the establishment of Te Pukenga could not establish it in the following 4 years. And that leads us to where we are right now. So in December 2023, the disestablishment of Te Pukenga started under the current government. So what have we got at the moment? In December 2023, the new Minister of Tertiary Education announced the disestablishment of Te Pukenga and the establishment of proposed establishment of 8 to 10 polytechs. There was no word on the future of industry training at that time. Currently, MITO and the other 7 former ITOs are operating as separate business units of Te Pukenga. And collectively, last year, these 8 former ITOs generated $100 million of surplus, which was not reinvested back into industry training and new programs to support workforce productivity increases. Instead, the surpluses were used to offset the $189 million loss generated by ITPs. This year, MITO is generating a 37% surplus. In other words, 37 cents of every dollar training fees being paid by industry, you as employers, is being used to prop up the operation of the government-owned ITPs. Not the role of industry to fund the operation of institutions. This year, all ITPs continue to generate deficits. They are all technically insolvent. MITO has been able to hold on to most of our people, well, for now anyway, and we continue to operate at a high level. A cabinet paper on the future of industry training is due to be released any day now, and will open for consultation. So, the future. New Zealand's industry training system was not broken when ITOs were forced to merge into Te Pukenga. MITO's results speak for themselves. In December 2023, 7 automotive and transport industry associations, including the VIA, sent an open letter to the Minister requesting the return of MITO, its resources and people back into industry leadership and ownership. There is no advantage for industry to have MITO merge with lower performing entities, whether they be other industry training organisations or ITPs. It will only drag MITO down to the level of the others and weaken its focus and delivery. If it's good enough to re-establish insolvent ITPs, it should be good enough to re-establish high-performing, surplus-generating, financially stable ITOs. With the tsunami of technology that's coming at the automotive industry, it needs to be able to rapidly develop qualifications and the associated programs for delivery in a much, much quicker time frame. standard setting must return to ITOs from WDCs. Look, thanks, Greg. I really want to thank you particularly. I know you and your association have been proactively lobbying government officials and ministers on behalf of VIA to return industry training to industry control. Yesterday, I heard on Radio New Zealand, MTA say that it wants an independent industry training organisation for its sector with the power to set standards and qualifications and deliver training. If the government did not get it right, employers would go elsewhere to train their staff. So, what's the next steps? Well, there is this cabinet paper that is going to be released any day now. And, I strongly suggest that you all review the options that are proposed in that paper. Talk to the VIA. And I encourage you all individually to provide a submission from your company as well as from the VIA. Every single submission counts. The outcome of this review will shape the future of industry training for the next 20 years. It's critical that the government gets this right. And I guess just to close off, to remember that MITO and industry training organisations have served industry extremely well over the last 25 to 30 years. Let's not take the great things from the past. Let's take the great things from the past to reshape the future. Let's not readopt the failed approaches from the past. That's me. Are there any questions?
Yeah, welcome any questions from anyone. Thanks very much, Phil. That was a roller coaster ride through the development of where we've gotten to. As you pointed out in some of your slides there, I mean, the one about the industry has called for, let's have our standard setting, control of the standard settings back. Let's have control of those resources. It's incredibly frustrating that the resources that have been passed through into MITO, and which MITO has managed obviously amazingly efficiently and very well, are being lost and not turned back into industry training. That's one of the most frustrating things, going through the reform process. There was never any indication. Obviously they were trying to say all great things about what the reforms were going to do, but ultimately what it has done is just distanced industry from the process even further. And certainly, we do agree with the comments of Lee Marshall from MTA there, that industry needs to take this control back, that industry needs more involvement in this. The cabinet paper, do you have any idea of what sort of options are going to be put out for consultation?
No, we don't. We really know as much as anyone else. I think the sad reality, if I can say that, Greg, is that these government agencies, MOE and TC, that are writing these papers, these policy people that are writing these proposals, as far as we know, they haven't engaged with our industries, with our associations. They certainly haven't engaged with MITO. And you ask the question, where do they get their information from? And TC doesn't understand how MITO achieves the results that it achieves. And I don't know that they're fulfilling their role as effectively as they could be.
Yeah. So remind me. So there's outside of Te Pukenga MITO, which is developing the training programs and delivering the training programs. there's NZQA and TEC. Now they have two different functions. TEC is the funder, is that right? And NZQA, what do they do? What are
Uh,
TEC and NZQA?
I,
And why are we never talking about them in these processes? Are they doing everything right?
Look, absolutely not. And in terms of TC, and I've had the experience of working there. Their role is, as the funder, is to drive the best outcomes both for the taxpayer and for industry and for New Zealand Inc. Their role is to share best practice across organisations so that those who aren't performing as well as other organisations, can lift their performance. Look, they don't even understand how we work. So how can they share our best practices with other people and vice versa? I'm sure there's things we could learn from other organizations. They need to be accountable for the role that they're doing because they're managing billions of dollars when you take the university and polytech sector into account. And in terms of NCQA, they're the quality assurance function around qualifications. And they, again, have a lack of understanding around industry training. And as typical of government agencies, are very, very slow to respond to engagement. And at a time when, as I said earlier, it's really critical as these hybrid biofuel, hydrogen, BEVs, fuels, all these different vehicles are going to be developed, ADAS systems, all coming along. We need to be responsive to developing the training to meet industry needs. And government agencies are certainly not, and particularly NZQA, are not as responsive as they need to be.
Yeah, flexible and agile is not necessarily what you tend to associate with government departments. Malcolm's got a question, and I'll also just to remind everyone else, put your hand up if you do have a question. We welcome any sort of questions that will help you understand how we got to where we are today, or even if you've got a general question about training and how MITO is delivering training. The floor's open to questions. But Malcolm, what did you want to say?
Yeah, no, just going on from what Phil said there about the amount of time that it takes for NZQA to actually get their backsides together and get stuff sorted out. I've been on a number of technical advisory groups and we've done all our work, had everything sitting there, and the amount of time that it's taken then for NZQA to put the rubber stamp on is absolutely diabolical. They really need to get their act together.
Can't agree more.
You said, Phil, there's currently 8 former ITOs, but your presentation mentioned that the reforms in the 2010s had reduced them down to 11. Should we be checking under the couch cushions? What's happened to the 3 ITOs that suddenly the math that now I'm an ex-lawyer and maths is not my strong point, but the math does not seem to work there.
Look, I can tell you where they're hiding. So back in 2020, when these initial reforms were floated, as I said earlier, MITO had no choice. Because of our relationship as arranging training nationally and our relationship across using pretty much all of the polytechs to deliver off-job training for us at various times, we had no choice but to join Te Pukenga. But 3 former ITOs made the choice to leave Te Pukenga or not join it. And what they've done is effectively gone off and established private training establishments. So they're still continuing to arrange training in their industries. They're just not they're doing it externally as a private training entity.
Okay. Um, Now, I probably I hadn't primed you for this question because it's more of a philosophical question about the way the whole thing is structured. It does sort of lead into the role of NZQA, but it, should vocational training be treated almost as a separate part of the education system, or even not part of the education system? Should it? Yeah, my thinking is around the fact the way that we look at trades training, um, we're creating this elitism that I don't think needs to be there, which is that trades training you do like a level 3 and a level 4, but if you go to university and you get a bachelor's degree, I think was that level 6 or 7?
7.
7. So, on that scale, you would sort of say, oh, someone who's completed a bachelor's is much, is better or more highly trained than someone who's completed a level 4 automotive technician course. But as I've said to many a room of smart people, I didn't want any of them touching my brakes. I want the guy or gal who's got the automotive technician qualification. There's nothing around where they sit in that qualification framework that says that my bachelor's degree from a university makes me smarter or better than someone who comes away with a vocational training degree. So should we be thinking of these things? Should there be a split between academic and vocational? Should we be thinking of these things more around celebrating the completion of a skill set?
Look, I totally agree. Those academic levels don't reflect that there is no gap between a qualified technician and some of those higher levels like entry level university qualifications. Look, I think industry training is very different to academic
Mm,
education, and it's not better, and it's certainly not worse. So
mm,
the Industry Training Federation, that was the umbrella organisation for ITOs, did some work a number of years ago, looking at the lifelong learning capability of people who completed trades versus completing a bachelor's degree, and over the lifetime of those learners, there wasn't a lot, if any, difference in terms of economic achievement, in their
mm,
lifetime. So it's just a different pathway. And I actually think it's really powerful that we keep industry training by and large separate from trying to merge it into academic institutions. It is so different.
mm,
They simply don't understand, and we can work collaboratively together. It's not we,
mm.
and certainly ITOs have always kept to their swim lanes. They're focused on doing what they need to do and do it well. And it doesn't. We don't have to be all merged into one entity.
Yeah.
Because what we saw at Te Pukenga was that scale, certainly within a government entity, just slowed things down at a time when industry needs to be responsive, not slowed
Mm.
down.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, it's a great look. A trades qualification, as we all know, is a pathway to uh, success.
Yeah. And you mentioned about the need for the industry that it's becoming more and more distant. I mean, MITO's always had a really good understanding of their business partners, and I'd say partners because the workplace training, is I think a collaboration between what MITO provides and what the workplace supervisors and senior technicians supervising the apprentices provide. So there's a real sort of synergy going on there. But do, is part of the problem that industry is almost forgotten in the conversations amongst the policy officials? Because I recall attending some of the reform of vocational education sessions, looking at this, and there was one session where I'd been there for about 3 or 4 hours, and no one had mentioned business or industry once. It was all learners and structuring the qualification, and I had to sort of stand up at one point and say, well, what about the business? What about the business that has taken this person on? And that is, do you feel that part of the reason that industry is finding itself drifting away from this area is because there's a lot of people in the policy space who, as you said, don't understand the role of business in this training.
Look, absolutely. The reality is, who are these policy people? They're well-meaning, well-educated, university-educated people who probably, almost certainly, have never engaged in any form of industry training, and so they only can look at life through the lenses of through their eyes, and the reality is. That was one of the failings of Te Pukenga. It put the learner at the center of everything. And yes, the learner should be at the center, but they actually need the employer next to them.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have an employer in industry training, you don't have a job, you don't have a learner.
Mm.
And unfortunately, our institutions, whether universities or polytechs or others, they might have heard vaguely of an employer, but that's about it. They just
Mm.
lack that understanding that industry training is about learning in the workplace, learning with a skilled technician beside you, and the other support that the employer wraps around there to make it happen. So the employer is just as important as the learner. Without one, you don't have the other.
Yeah. No, fantastic. All right, I'm gonna give the audience one more chance for someone to put their hands up. Um, if you've got any questions, otherwise, I think we've had a great conversation, Phil. I think you've given us a great grounding on how we've gotten to where we're at, what some of the key issues are, certainly the importance of training to the industry and the importance of the industry being involved in training, in that the industry needs to be looking to take back control and be much more influential in what's going on, and we've kind of lost that now. So certainly we will endeavour to make sure that everyone hears about the consultation when the cabinet paper has been processed and comes out. And we'll absolutely be putting a submission in on that one, and would encourage everyone to, if you really want to see some improvements, and really let's just settle the whole situation down and get some clarity about moving forward with this. Encourage everyone to put a submission in. If you're wondering what you might need to say, or what areas are of special interest, I'm sure Phil would be happy for people to contact him, or you can contact us at VIA, and we can help work through what some of the issues are that we need to be talking about to government on this. But looking like there's no more questions, so just leaves it to me to thank you, Phil. Phil Urlich from MITO Te Pukenga. That's been a really great presentation. We will be putting this presentation up on the VIA YouTube channel. There is a VIA YouTube channel. We got that one set up, so I've now put all our previous webinars up on that channel as well. The last couple that we've done, and we will continue to feed the content into that channel. And we will let everyone know when this consultation paper comes out. But thank you, Phil, for your time, and thank you to everyone else on the call for listening in. And we only lost 2 people through that call, so I think that's pretty amazing. We did well to keep you all involved. So thank you very much for staying on, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Look, thanks for the invitation, and good luck to to everyone, and make a submission. That's my comment.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.